A Gorilla in the Guest Room, written by Gerald Durrell in 1962, is about the relation between a gorilla named Npongo and his caretaker Mr. Durrell. The author gets a phone call from an animal dealer asking if he wanted a baby gorilla for his zoo. Mr. Durrell feels that the way Africa government is at the moment, gorillas may extinct in the next 20 years. So, being an animal lover, he decides to accept it and asks how much that dealer wants for the baby gorilla. The dealer says he'll take £1,200, which the author feels is quite reasonable for a baby gorilla, but he fears that it may turn out to be merely a baby chimpanzee because most animal dealers can't distinguish between chimpanzee and gorillas. Yet he accepts it anyway. Only one problem is, he doesn't have that much money on him at the moment. His wife tells him he was mad to accept the proposal in the first place since he doesn't have money, and that gorilla may turn out to be a chimpanzee. But Mr. Durrell tells her that he'll ask all the rich men to contribute for this, to which his wife laughs, saying no one will pay for it. Mr. Durrell rings one of his colleagues and asks him to send him a list of the richest men of that island. In about 30 minutes, that colleague gives him a list. He rings up the first person, who happens to accept the proposal and agrees to pay for a small portion. By lunchtime, he has collected £200. The next person on the list is Major Domo. The name isn't familiar to him, so he doesn't know what his reaction would be. But he's shocked when the man agrees to pay £1,000 for the gorilla. That's how Npongo walks into his life. Npongo is a healthy, good-natured gorilla with a nice sense of humor as well. Since his cage, where they were supposed to keep Npongo, wasn't ready, they kept him in the guest room of the author's house. At first, the author's wife and mother were afraid what the baby gorilla would do, but Npongo, with his surprisingly courteous manners and humorous nature, wins the heart of everyone. After a few years, Mr. Durrell feels it's time to get a mate for Npongo. He asks the dealer from whom he had bought him if there is any chance he could find a mate for him. The dealer tells him he indeed knows someone who has a female gorilla who's a year or two younger than Npongo. He buys Nandi, the female gorilla, on an installment plan. Upon arrival, he notices scars on her fur-covered skin and also her scared, lost expression. So he puts her in a separate cage in front of Npongo's. At first, they don't show any interest in each other, but later Npongo becomes quite curious about her. With his humor, he wins her over. One day, Npongo falls seriously ill. No one's sure what the real problem is but is worried for him. He stops eating and loses a lot of weight. To lure him into eating, the author brings some exotic fruits and a watermelon. Though he doesn't show much interest in the fruits, he eats the watermelon. He doesn't show any sign of improvement, and the author grows anxious, for he was due to leave for France, where he had organized a bee's nest of helpers and advisors. He didn't want to leave seeing his condition, but just a day before his departure, Npongo showed signs of recovery. He starts eating properly, and the gleam in his eyes was coming. By the time the author came back, Npongo had put on all the weights he had lost and was perfectly cheery again.